All right, I believe we are live. Let me just check real quick. We are live. Welcome everyone to Meet the Masters, episode number 50. I'm joined by Master John Godwin. Good afternoon, sir.
Hi, everybody.
How are you?
I'm great. Looking forward to catching up with Tim on some of the past and hopefully moving forward to the present.
Absolutely. So I'm pretty sure, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, that you were the first. So Jeff and I kind of did the trial run of these interviews, and I believe you were the first one that Jeff did. Is that correct?
That may be correct. I believe that it may have been. You guys would know. You kept the order on that, so
yeah, I believe.
I thought it was a great idea, and I remember we talked about it, and it's turned out to be, I think, quite successful. People enthusiastically look forward with anticipation to these interviews. And I've enjoyed watching all of them. I don't necessarily get on there live. The great thing is you can watch it later if you're busy. They happen right around when I have to become an Uber and drive my kids home from school.
Yeah, that's helpful though, being a karate instructor, that you are, before 5 o'clock, you can be the Uber driver.
Yes, it is. And I enjoy the time that I do that. Yes.
So it's almost been a year since you did that first interview with Jeffrey. Where are we, or I guess where are you 1 year past that, that conversation?
That interview was definitely when we were in a shutdown.
Yeah.
So, we were able to open here in Delaware on June 8th or thereabouts, beginning of June. And we've been open all that time since without any incident of COVID infection here at the school. We did have one exposure issue where we shut down for 2 weeks in December. But, no one caught COVID here or anything like that. So we've been operating safely now into 2021. Master Priest spearheaded, contacting the state and getting us approval to add sparring back. And then also one steps. So we've opened up quite a bit compared to maybe some other people in other parts of the country, or especially in other countries. Maybe.
Right.
But yeah, we're preparing everyone for sparring, and we haven't actually begun yet because a lot of people, their foot gear don't fit. The kids are larger a year later and their gear doesn't fit. I'm like, everybody check your gear, make sure it fits. Then of course we have students who joined in the last year who don't have gear yet. And so we've been sparring with air shields, hitting targets, so on. The first few days of hitting targets, I was like, oh my gosh, these people have no depth perception. They should not be sparring because they don't know how long their hands and feet are, because we weren't hitting pads and we were socially distanced at 9 feet here in this classroom, so.
Yeah, I found the same thing happening, and I feel like every day we have 2 or 3 sparring gear packages that we're handing out to people.
Yes. And so we're starting with hitting. We have been doing ribbon sparring because we have a tournament scheduled for this region in April. And so I did ribbon sparring yesterday with some of the young kids, and it was quite entertaining. They have no idea about it. We haven't done it in a year, and so it was fun. They had a blast. They loved it,
Awesome. We have some people saying hello, sir. So I'm just going to go through some names.
We can have some shout outs for sure.
Yeah. Yoshi Oda says good afternoon. We have quite a few people from Region 11, Great Britain. Natalie and Lindsay and Gaynor says good afternoon. Mr. Lyon says good afternoon. We got Master Joe McCarty from Alabama says hello.
Master Joe is the senior guy right there. He's one of the early pioneers of Tang Soo Do in America.
Yes, sir. And I
definite respected elder, to say that.
Absolutely. I loved his pictures and the history that he's documented, and definitely a motivation for me. Mr. John Chandler says good afternoon. Brian Ormiston, Brian Burkett. Everyone's
great. Well, we got a tribe. We've got a tribe coming. Hopefully some more join in. And you record these so, everybody can enjoy them later as well.
So I think this might be a fun question to start with. Lindsay asked, any stories or memories of Master Watson?
Well, I do have one. The one time I hurt you, and I never like when I hurt a student. Okay. And I had been practicing some Hapkido skills, and you were aspirant at that time. And I came to Hokessen, and I believe I did a shoulder throw on you, attacking style, and I hurt your shoulder. So yeah, that's a good Master Watson story, because you were always a good practitioner. I don't think I ever had any reservations about doing moves on you or anything. There are a couple of instructors that I would never put a glove on hardly, because I didn't want to injure them, but you were pretty good at it. And that was the one exception. So that's one Master Watson story.
Yeah, that was the, dive over your own arm. And I was supposed to go this way, and I just went straight down and just crashed right on my shoulder. I take full responsibility for that one. I was disappointed because that was actually Master Khan was in the town for a Hyung application, and I had to go to the.
That was a fantastic event,
and I missed it.
and we had scheduled, I think, 7 seminars with him and Master Green and me and some others, and we traveled to 7 different places and taught forms application. And it was just so awesome because, I can utilize a lot of my understanding of Hapkido and interpreting it, how it shows up in the forms. So for me, I have that wealth. And then Master Khan has his own view. And it was really neat to learn from him how he looks at how the moves work. Mm-hmm. And I have probably more than a dozen, 10 to 20 special moves I learned from him at that time. And some of them are really outstanding. I still teach them all the time now that I learned from that series of doing it. So any time in World Tang Soo Do, we collaborate with other top masters. I think the masters who learn it try to pay it forward to the next generation.
I'm gonna have to schedule a private lesson to learn those from you since I missed it.
Yeah. And now we have people who study with Ian Abernathy and all these other experts on how to utilize karate in a functional way that makes sense. And I think it's great that we have a more practical view as well as an aesthetics,
Yes, sir. So a disclaimer for anyone watching, I posted the original video of you with Master Setianto. So if you want the Master Godwin story from the very beginning, like how he started, I encourage you to watch that video. And there's so much. I wrote down a bunch of questions. We have so much we can get into, so I don't want to go over too much that was already out there. So go back and watch that. So I'm just going to start at the top of my list. Do you recall the first time you traveled outside of? And you may have touched base on this a little bit, but you started with Grandmaster Kian Yi. When was the first time that you traveled outside of the dojang to train?
I actually never traveled outside of Yi's Karate Institute ever to train somewhere else per se. There was no open forum back then for such things. Mm-hmm. We never had guest masters come into our school when I was a color belt, before I was a black belt. There wasn't that kind of collaboration in my school as a student. I did go to Grandmaster Shin School in Burlington to watch a Dan test because we had students testing there. And I happened to get to see Master Chambliss test for 4th degree black belt. Wow. And these were some bad dudes. There was John Britt, which most people don't know who he is, not Vance Britt. John Britt, Stephen Chambliss, James Lee, and a guy named Pedro Medina. And I watched those guys and was just frightened. These guys were ferocious from Trenton. That 4 of them tested for the 4th Dan at the Burlington Shin Karate. That was one of the only out events. I did go to a lot of tournaments though, but we didn't train with the instructors from these other schools. It wasn't that collaborative. And in my school, there were black belts that would come and teach as assigned teachers, but there were no really special events. We didn't have parents' nights out. We didn't have guest instructors come. The first time I did that kind of training was literally at the charter convention.
Wow.
Now, I had done demos with my teacher. He would have a black belt spectacular or witness the unbelievable type of show. And I graduated when I was like a high red belt to being the lucky person to attack him and get beat up. And so we had those experiences. I did a demo once with my teacher in Madison Square Garden, S. Henry Cho's All-American Championship in Madison Square Garden. Master Yi did the demo. So I came in, of course, with the Uki who got beat up. Then he did a board breaking in the ring and so on. And interestingly enough, when that demo was over, all of a sudden smoke bombs flew into the ring and, ninjas started diving over the ropes and we just got out of there and the ninjas took over. So we did get a little upstaged by the ninja attack on the stage, and it was neat being backstage with the master and all these other masters were doing demos. And, I aspired to, at some point in the 80s, 3 times make it into the finals at Madison Square Garden. So there might be 125 lightweights in the boxing ring and going through all those competitors and making it to the first place fight 3 times.
Wow.
And all 3 times I did not win first. But I do believe that 2 of the 3 times I did win the match. I just didn't get the points. But I'm not a poor sport or anything. It just is what it is.
That's right.
But so, yeah, I didn't have the opportunity to have those kind of special trainings. But to be honest, my master was so good, I didn't need anybody else. I remember asking him once if I could do kickboxing because Master Chambliss was teaching kickboxing. And this is before I went to work for Grandmaster Shin. And I said, sir, can I do kickboxing, so on and so forth? And he said, yes, absolutely. There's the door. Leave, never come back. And I was like, well, it's not that important to me. I'm not gonna resign as a student to do kickboxing. And I think that was because maybe he had some black belts in the 70s who got into kickboxing and it affected their attitude and their ability to be a good martial arts traditional student in an organization like our Tang Soo Do group. And then that is disappointing if that happens, if you get disillusioned students and then they're no longer able to function as, the kind of student that he required you to be one of his top people,
Right.
So the answer to that was the first time I traveled outside of my school was always as an assistant to Master Yi. And when we started World Tang Soo Do, he was the technical advisory committee chairman. And so one of the first projects was making the 21 to 31 steps and the installation of those with the first 3 conventions. And then filming that project in South Philly, the first videotape of the 1 steps. I was featured in there with my teacher and some other instructors.
Awesome.
Doing that.
So once you were at headquarters with Grandmaster Shin, you did get the chance to train with people, and specifically, I wanted to talk about the Quan Brothers, Young H and Young K.
That was actually like a contingency of me being hired. It was an
Okay.
agreement that we had that I could train in the daytime. I could go back to Master Yi's school on Tuesday and Thursday in the daytime and still continue to train with him. Even after he left World Tang Soo Do, I still trained with him for a couple of years. And at some point he said, you just stay to Grandmaster Shin. And we agreed that I would stick with him. And I stopped training there as a student after he'd been out a couple of years, actually, probably by like 88. He left in 86 to do his own organization. And him and Grandmaster Shin were friendly after he left. He left in a certain way that they agreed he would do his own thing. And the Quan Brothers, I think he was still friendly with Grandmaster Shin, and they left. And I had asked permission when I got the job with him that I could train with other people and do things like boxing and kickboxing. And he said, yes, you can do that, but don't make chop suey. If you're teaching a Tang Soo Do class, you have to teach our standards. If you're teaching them Hapkido, tell them, hey, this is Hapkido. If it's Judo, this is Judo. Back then we had Carmen Minelli was hanging out in that school quite a bit. when I first went to work there, he would always come in, and he was a judo guy, you know, at the time. And then the boxing, there were guys that came into the school in the daytime just to box. So I started boxing with these guys. And then I started to train with Master Chambliss in kickboxing. And so when I opened the school in Delaware here, I was driving up to Trenton a couple days a week doing kickboxing. And I would sometimes drive from my home in South Philly to train with the Quan Brothers, which is back to your question. And I remember the first time I went to train with Quan, he made me go out and run 5 miles, and I used to run 3 miles. And he said, well, if you run 3, you might as well run 5. There's no difference once you reach your plateau. You just keep going. So I did, and it was actually true. And so from like one of my first lessons with him, I started running 5 miles 3 times a week instead of 3. Because somewhere around 1 to 2 miles is the discomfort point where you kind of wake up and get that plateau where you can kind of keep on going. And so that was a conditioning thing for me. Then we would go back to the school and we would do forms, or we would do the bong. Then we would do kickboxing. He used to have boxing gloves with duct tape on them. And when Quan would beat you up with those boxing gloves, you would end up with a lot of nice black and blue marks on your chest from where the duct tape would dig in. We would fight with no shirts on. But I remember his gloves had duct tape, and those of us that would fight with him knew. They would grab onto your skin when he nailed you with the shots.
Wow.
And another thing he used to do that was quite exciting is he would make you get against the wall, and he would put 2 people who would push your legs with their feet all the way to the wall. Then you had to lay down. Then he would stand on your back, and he weighed $180 or $190 if he weighed a pound. So he was pretty big. So you learned to have a full straddle in his school if he thought that he wouldn't kill you doing it to you. Yeah, the workouts were really like 2-3 hours long. They were like an instructor's class, really. They weren't like a regular workout. They were like an instructor's workout. He was quite a martial artist. I never trained privately with young Cook Quan, but I was very friendly with him, and I did win his tri-state championship, grand championship a couple times. So I was a couple times the grand champion of Quan's tournament, but and numerous times, you know, won weapons, fighting forms, different divisions. But back then, to get grand, you had to fight the lightweight winner, the heavyweight winner, and the middleweight winner. And getting past the heavyweight winner was not always as easy as it was getting through the lightweight division. I could win the lightweight division, but beating the bigger guys who were taller, longer arms, longer legs, that was a bit more of a challenge. We don't have that in World Tongue Sudo. We actually have what we consider a triple crown,
right,
where you win 3 divisions and you get points. Then you're, you know, a multi-divisional point earner, and then you get a cumulative grand championship rather than defeating the other divisions.
They probably learned some lessons from those early days of putting the lightweights with the heavyweights.
Yeah. Well, some of the lightweights were so lightning fast that it was actually flips to the other side. This guy was going to beat the heavy guy, you know. But to be honest, if they wanted to manhandle you, then it could be rough on your end if you were the small guy.
Right.
So that's a little bit about the past, how I had some opportunities to train outside of my school.
Yeah. So just a couple quick people saying hello. Michael Lee from Mozambique says big hugs to Master Godwin.
Yeah, we had a wonderful trip there with Dr. Strong. We can talk about that if you want.
Yes. Master Marco from Sweden says hello. And Master Four from Seychelles says hello as well.
Hello to everybody. I certainly enjoyed the trips to Europe, and you have questions down here for that, so I'll wait until we hit that.
Okay.
I think I addressed a little bit of my training with the Quan Brothers. I do still teach things that I learned there, like Bong Form 4. I teach that when I travel for World Tongue Sudo or anywheres, and people enjoyed that form. That was one of their Quan forms. Then he worked with me to make a demo form for tournaments, and we call that Bong 6 for our school. That, instead of making a form, he was like, let's take some advanced skills and you can integrate them into a form that I had learned called Young Moon Hyung from my teacher, Master Yi. So I made an expanded version of that. and then went on to use that form for like 15, 20 years, winning weapons frequently. I once even was awarded a 10 in weapons by Peter Urban, the founder of American Gojo-Ryu, at a tournament. And Master Chambliss was there, and he was like, "John, Peter Urban gave you a 10, man." And I was like, "Yeah, that's pretty cool."
That's a great form. I love that form. I kid with people. I was like, I will teach it to you. It's about a 2.5 to 3 minute form.
It is. When you're done, you're huffing and puffing.
Oh yeah, it's a great form though.
Now, if you put Bong Combat after it,
yes,
you'll be really tired because you do the Bong 6 and then you go into combat. By the time you're done that, you're dizzy.
I've done 4 into combat.
4 in combat, I was teaching last Friday for our leadership class here.
That's great.
6 into combat will tire you out. You will be tired at the end. Only the most elite of my students can do 6 and the combat and still not be falling over.
Yeah. So the next thing I want to talk about is your travels with Grandmaster Shin. So if you just touch base on, you can talk about the first time, and I know you wanted to talk about the China trip as well. So you just talk about some of your travels with Grandmaster Shin and some of the memories.
The first trip I took with Grandmaster Shin was to Michigan. And at that time, there was a Master Rutherford and his wife and some other masters and Mike Romines and some of these. Back then, I believe that Matt Oakes was maybe 12 years old at that time. And so Master Oakes was a kid in the first seminar. And then I have pictures of me with Bill Klingon and Grandmaster Shin at that event. And I didn't realize that Bill Klingon had flown in from California to be at that event. But there were some other masters came, and it was actually kind of a significant seminar in Michigan. And at that event, the Master Romines gave me a videotape of the early years of Tang Soo Do in Korea from the 1950s. There was Jae-Jun Kim's group had filmed basics and all the forms, and these were 8mm movie films. Nowadays, it's available on YouTube and on Facebook, and people see it. Remember we did the 40th anniversary of Shin Karate, and Patrick made a video, and it had some archival footage in it. That was that footage that came from that visit there. But that master had gifted me a videotape of some old forms, and I can look at the level of skill of the participants in Korea at that time, and it was actually kind of crude. Their basic actions were not as highly refined, and it's probably because they didn't have that much training yet. It hadn't evolved. But what we have in World Tang Soo Do is highly refined, the technical caliber to be a top student in one of our world championship or regional tournament is very well refined now, standardized. Our technical syllabus was expanded and improved upon. So a lot of good work came as a result of 30 years of World Tang Soo Do or more to what those standards may have looked back in the 1950s and 60s. Now, that being said, I wouldn't want to have to spar those guys back then because the sparring was pretty rough, but the forms have evolved, and I think they evolved in most Tang Soo Do groups, not only World Tang Soo Do. But no, we did a clinic there, and I put on a demonstration. I remember I did Shibum Hyung Ilabu, which used to be called Shin Yi Hyung. I did that demo form. I did a split kick, some stuff. Master Romines was actually having people shoot arrows at him and catching them out of the air. So we would do these more extreme demonstrations. You might stand there and do some key breathing and have people smash, boards over you. So we did a demo. It was in a big YMCA, the clinic, and a lot of people came from different areas to train. So that was one of the earliest travels, was to go to Michigan with Grandmaster Shin. Flint, Michigan, I think it was the city it was in.
Okay.
So that's probably the first one. And then we did the charter convention in 82, 83, and 85. So I traveled with him in 84 to Michigan. Then we had another clinic at the Delaware line in 85. And those were opportunities in 82, 83, and 85 where you could get together and train with other masters. So that didn't really happen until we started World Tung Sudo.
So we really
in 1990, I went to China. In 1989, we bought tickets, and then Tiananmen Square happened. So the incident with the students in Tiananmen Square in 1989, we couldn't go on the trip. So it was delayed to 91. In 1991, a group of us had tickets to go to Hong Kong and then on to Beijing, China, and then travel around to 11 different cities in China. And it was a 3-week trip. So it was pretty long. It was, pretty good sized trip. And we flew to Hong Kong first. Master Vaughn had made the connection for the China through a master in Hong Kong. So we flew to Hong Kong first, visited there, and then we went on to Beijing. When we got to Beijing, I remember that my first day there, I got really sick at the counter of the hotel in the morning and passed out and fell over. And I had kind of like a Montezuma's revenge. I had a stomach virus or something, a bug. And the first 3 days there that we were in Beijing, I was really sick. I had, like a fever and things, but I did the whole thing. I went with them. It was just pretty uncomfortable the first couple of days of sightseeing in Beijing. Then we got on a plane and we're going to fly to the old capital, Xi'an, and then go from there to Zhangzhou, where the Shaolin Temple was. Before we left Beijing, Grandmaster Shin got notification that his father was ill, and he decided to leave and fly back to Korea to visit his father. And he left me and Master K and some of the other seniors in charge of that group. And the travel person who was our guardian for the whole trip, the guide, he had been with Grandmaster Shin on the earlier trip and had the whole agenda all arranged. So Grandmaster Shin actually left and left us in charge of doing that, all the steps of that trip. And it was quite a long process. It wasn't just a visit to the Shaolin Temple. Then there were several other cities. We went to Shanghai and different elements of that. We had wushu exchanges in numerous places. So when we went to the Shaolin Temple, we met with the abbot of the Shaolin Temple in the morning at like 4:30, 5 a.m. We arrived there. They came out at about 7 a.m., opened the gate. We did a demo for the abbot. We exchanged gifts. He gave me this wonderful charcoal etching of Bodh Dharma. And if you've ever been in my office, you'll see behind my desk, I have this charcoal etching that was actually given to me by the head abbot of the Shaolin Temple. And we performed a demo, then we went in, and of course, by that point in 1987, they had arranged to have a monument in the old temple. It's still there because I went there in 2002, and it was still in the main courtyard, our monument. But no, 05, I went there in 2005. Yeah, 2005, I went to China. And, we did a wushu exchange next door. And one of the cool things about the wushu exchange was we did a demonstration. Then, of course, the Shaolin Temple group has to come out and do a better demonstration. And then you can exchange techniques. I don't think you're supposed to go to the Shaolin Temple and try to show up the monks, But we went out and we did one steps and we did forms and we did some breaking of some stuff. And the thing that I thought was amazing was there was a monk came out and he was actually the trainer of the young monks at the temple. And I'm going to say he was somewhere between 25 and 35 years old, this young monk who was the head trainer. And he did this kung fu form where he actually bounced across the floor off of his head 3 or 4 times in a row and then makes a posture. And I was like, man, that's some hard training right there when you do a handspring off your head 3 times in a row. So we had the benefit of having exchanges in different cities and eating crazy food. When we went to go to the Shaolin Temple, we were received in Xi'an by like the provincial governor, and we went to a big hotel to have dinner. And at that dinner, I was told that whatever he puts on my plate, I'm supposed to eat it. But I had been really sick in my stomach. And then, of course, they pour shots of local liquor and you have to take a shot of that. And I wasn't feeling real good, but I was eating anything that he put on my plate. Then they brought a cart in and they had monkey brain on the half shell. So I actually got served monkey brains at that dinner. And so that's a memorable experience of travel.
Real quick, got a couple people saying hi and a couple questions. So actually, Master Dan Alabac says, good to see you're doing well, sir.
Hi, Dan. Kung Su, I have a student for you.
Pam Russell.
Transferring to his town. I'll send somebody to him.
Yes, sir. Pam Russell says hello. Master Benelli says hello from Ecuador. This is kind of off, but Yoshi asks, what was your greatest victory during the challenges of COVID?
Ooh, greatest victory of COVID. I'm hard pressed on that question.
So
I'm not sure I have a greatest victory other than the students who remained dedicated and came in and trained. And for some of them, it was particularly hard to get students who were not adept in Zoom. The top students in Zoom are like A students, they learn quick, they do well in Zoom. But the B and the C students in Zoom who are literally bumping into the walls of their home, getting them through that process and then getting them to come back to class, that might be the best victory. Yeah. Was getting students that were not talented in Zoom to be able to stay the course, stick to it, and then return to training in class. And then obviously when you have hands-on in class, you can do a more effective job of completing. And I still have some students in Zoom right now that require a great deal of patience to kind of try to walk them through some of the skills and to, you know, have an infinite amount of patience to get them through that.
Yeah, I would say it was definitely a team effort getting everything coordinated. And I know, you know, there was some times where you had some students that joined our Zooms classes as well. So I think I still call it our team, and you probably feel the same way since you taught and brought up most of us. But you know, the guys around Delaware really came together and helped each other in those times.
Now that would be a victory, but I won't take credit for that one. But our whole team working together, like the team from Middletown, Dover, Kennett, here, we worked together and everybody got back to action as quick as we could. And so I think we definitely teamed up. It's a we, not a me thing. I still run this school as if it's a training place. So the names are different, but the process is still the same of grooming instructors and having people involved. So right now it might be Master Hurd, Lon Ho, Ryan Russell, other instructors are here doing it, but it's still the same thing.
Yes, sir.
Teaming up.
So going back to travel, can you talk to us about some of your travels through Region 11? You know, we talked about Master Marco. I know that you got to travel with I'm sure Grandmaster Shin and Grandmaster Godwin. Even if you didn't travel with them, you got the chance to be at events that they were at. So maybe talk about some of the travels throughout Region 11.
You know, it's kind of really weird right now to realize that there's lots of people now in our groups that don't know Grandmaster Shin and didn't attend events that he was at. Yes, because of my entire adult life, I had him there, and I cherished all those events from our black belt camps in Region 8, adult camp, youth clinics, masters clinics, tournaments, special clinics at different regions that he would send me to go and help or do assigned duties, you know. And then the same thing with Grandmaster Godwin. You know, he spent his entire adult life contributing to World Tung Sudo once we had the charter conventions and he was in. He was always there, always helping, always leading. He was quite a wise man, you know. Grandmaster Godwin was not so much my technical instructor, but he certainly was a wisdom and a dignity and a respect that he portrayed to the whole group was incredible. And losing him last year was was quite sad and sudden. And it was an honor to be a participant at any event with him and assist in any way, Grandmaster Shin or Grandmaster Godwin. Some of my pleasures in England early on, maybe in the 90s, I had an opportunity to go to England and teach for educational funding companies some business seminars. And then I made arrangements to visit with Quan. That may have been one of my first trips there. I know I went to Holland in 1997, 98, that time frame, and I did 5 cities around Holland. I visited England a couple times to England. Then we went to Wales for the Master's Clinic, Germany a couple times for the Master's Clinic. So I visited there a number of times. The hospitality was always exceptional. I mean, when you show up at a Master's event at Europe, they roll out the red carpet for you. You're treated from the moment you arrive to the moment you leave as a VIP, much like we do here in the US when they come. Everything's organized, well planned out. One of my fond memories is being declared Lord of Castle Caldecott and having a banquet in a real castle, and the meal with everyone and having such a good time at this banquet in an actual castle, you know.
Was that the
People teaching, traveling, teaching all kinds of things at these different clinics and seminars. And then of course they usually have their championship in conjunction with that, and then participating and seeing the level of competition in the European market, in the schools, the regional tournament for Europe has always been very competitive. The students are very serious. They work hard. They're well prepared. They present themselves with dignity, respect, and it's tough competition.
Was the time where you were at the castle? I believe I remember seeing pictures. They got you in a some traditional uniform or costume.
Yeah. There was a person who coordinates the guests who come to do the events, and you know, I was the guest of honor, but then I decided to kind of play into the theme a bit, and you know, I had Genghis Khan was Master Khan as my right-hand man. And on the left, I had Baron von Trogeman and different kind of names I gave to people. Then there are a couple of masters from England who are literally comedians. So those guys are hilarious. And then there's people who could play music and stuff. And they'd never had someone come there and just kind of take over the drama of the whole thing. But our group, we all just fit together and we had such a good time. And it was quite memorable for everyone who was in attendance.
If you've ever been at an event with Master Godwin and someone asked him to lead it and puts him in charge, it's usually a fun time, whether you're the MC trying to get bids up for auction items or whatever the case may be. There's no shortage of energy.
Yeah, you know, I have a love for what we do and the people who are in it. And it's usually like that, you know.
So when I first started training at your studio in Newark, I did Tong Soo Do training, and I immediately went into the Hapkido part of it as well. And you know, looking back 20 years later, I realized how well those two fit together and how it serves me well to have a Hapkido base as well as my Tong Soo Do training. So if you could just talk to us about how you got into Hapkido. I know you touched base on this a little bit in the other interview, but talk about your Hapkido training, working with Grandmaster G, and some of the travel and opportunities you've been afforded through that as well.
Well, Grandmaster Shin practiced Hapkido with Bang Soo Han on Osan Air Force Base. They had the Quonset hut, and there was the Tong Soo Do school and the Hapkido school. And he was a lifelong good friend of the very famous movie star Bang Soo Han from the Billy Jack movie. And he was issued a Hapkido Dan certificate in 1968 when he came to America. Actually went to headquarters with Grandmaster G and showed him Grandmaster Shin's Dan certificate. And he said that certificate was issued by Bang Soo Han, but he had my approval. And so it's sealed by Grandmaster G's name and Bang Soo Han's name are on the certificate that Grandmaster Shin has. And back then he had worked in the Blue House from 1961 to 1978. So he wasn't really free to travel around and test everybody and do all that. So he had instructors in different areas that were in charge. And then, of course, Hapkido instructors were dispatched all around the world. They sent people to Vietnam, to other countries, to the US. And, you know, so we always did do Hapkido in my school. Master Yi came up in the Osan school and had learned Hapkido there as well. And so we did it at our school from when I was a color belt. And then when I went to work for Grandmaster Shin, I joined the American Hapkido Association and started practicing under that group, and never actually took a rank certificate from that group because the way it was organized, I liked the curriculum and I liked what I was learning, and it expanded my Hapkido, but I didn't like the way the organization was structured. And so I just did it to learn Hapkido. I wasn't there for certification or whatever. And in 1987, Ken McKenzie came to a big tournament in Philadelphia that I was in. And at that tournament, I was competing in forms. And they had a division for Korean martial arts. They had a division for Japanese martial arts and a division for Chinese martial arts. And you could only compete if you were invited as a competitor of notoriety. Like you had to be a rated type of competitor. You had to be of noted experience. And so I was invited to be in it as a participant. And I was on the Korean fighting team in team fighting, not individual sparring. And then I did weapons and forms there. And I was very proud in that tournament of doing the forms and winning first place in that All-American Championship, which was televised and held in the Core State Center at the time, and it later became Wells Fargo Center. And the television coverage was because Pat Croce was the owner of the 76ers, and it was in conjunction with the 76ers game. The tournament was in the daytime and it was filmed for television. And then at nighttime, there was the basketball game, and Ken McKenzie was going to do a breaking demo at halftime. And I seen Ken had a Hapkido patch, and I was like talking to him, and he made the introduction to Grandmaster G. So I went to Grandmaster Shin and I asked him, can I train with Grandmaster G? And he approved it. He said, yes, just don't lose balance, you know. And so he was an advocate for me doing the Hapkido. And that's kind of how that happened. You know, I always did it as a student. And then once I met Grandmaster G, it was a big difference. You had the opportunity to train with Grandmaster G quite a bit in some of the seminars when we would move around the schools here. How did you enjoy taking a class with him?
I always enjoyed it. He was very tough on your instructors. So he would come and he would do, you know, 3 or 4 hour seminars with your students. And then you would bring him during the day and he would do instructor training. And he was different. He was definitely different with the instructors. He expected a lot from us. And I don't remember when or I shared the story, but he actually told me I was the worst Hapkido instructor in the world one time. And he hit me with the shinai when he was sitting in his chair after he had his hip worked on. So, you know, he, like I said, he expected a lot from us. And I think that was because of you, because you were one of his top students and, you know, you were very skilled in that art. So he expected a lot from your team.
He did. He expected a lot. Like Master Claus has a funny one where he says, how could you be so wrong?
Yep.
Grandmaster G would look at you and he would teach us. And then if he didn't like what he saw, he'd be like, how can you be so wrong?
Yeah.
It's just kind of like saying, how could you be so dumb and do that wrong after I just showed it to you? Like, but he didn't mean it in a bad way. Everybody understood that he really just wanted us to be great.
Right.
Yeah, it wasn't really bullying or picking on us because we were all grown adult instructors and so on. It was a different level of training.
Yes.
Yeah, and it was pretty good stuff.
I think Master Claus has another one where he told him, he's like, it's not wrong, but it's not right.
Yeah, and you know, a lot of war stories from those hundreds of instructor courses that were run in this classroom right here.
Yes, sir.
Probably more than 300 seminars. I know because I dispersed the fees for all of those. So I have a list of all the days that we did seminars.
Yes, sir. Hey, speaking of Hapkido, Perry Smuggs just chimed in and said hello from Austria. So
all right, Master Smoog, good job. Fun guy. You've had his class, right?
yes,
The
sir.
guy's a wizard. He's amazing. Yeah, terrific martial artist.
So talk about some of your travel for Hapkido.
Well, one of the biggest and most exciting of the trip was to go to Korea and participate in Hapkido tournaments. So in 1999 and 2002, I fielded teams and I went to Korea, and we participated in events there. And participating in those tournaments was pretty exciting. So we had cool tourism, and then we had that, like the one in 2002, we actually went to Japan. And when we were in Japan first, we got to go to the Kodokan Judo headquarters and see and then participate in judo. And then we got to go to the Aikido headquarters and have a class and participate in Aikido and see them teaching. And then we got to go to the headquarters for Daido Ruaiki Jiu-Jitsu. And the master came out and did the most ferocious demonstration I've ever seen. He did completely attacking techniques, very much like Jihan J teaches. He didn't do any defenses from grabs or attacks. He just literally, the person made a move and he attacked the attacker. And, so those opportunities to participate in those different martial arts were quite unique. The facilitator for those trips was Dr. Hyun Kim, who was a unique person in that he had an 8th degree black belt when I met him in judo. He was a college judo athlete and came to America as a full-time judo coach to Memphis State University. He was also a Hapkido grandmaster under Jihan J. And he was a Kuksul grandmaster under the founder of Kuksul Wan, which is kind of like Korean Kung Fu. And then he was an 8th degree in Taekwondo. So like I actually was schooled by him. How can you be a master of more than one art? How do you balance that out and in groups that have divergent maybe objectives? And he was a very good mentor to me, and I'm very appreciative to the experiences and the opportunity to learn from Dr. Kim how to balance those things out.
Yes, sir.
One of the exciting things we did was Woo Jin Jung is the owner of Taekwondo Times Magazine. And this month is the final edition of that being published as an actual physical magazine. Wow. And Woo Jin Jung's the featured cover. So if you have a chance to get Taekwondo Times Magazine, you can learn a little bit about him. He's on the final cover. It's in magazine stands. After that, it will be digital. So it's going to switch to virtual only. But they had planned a trip to the 50th anniversary of Taekwondo in North Korea. And I had a chance to go with Patrick Priest, Dante Davis, myself, Muhammad Mabrook, Laura Myers. We fielded a team to go and participate in that. And that was a pretty unique trip visiting North Korea. Pretty amazing. We were received well. You have to go to China, then fly in on the North Korean plane, then participated in their events, and then we got to tour around the country and see all kinds of amazing things and culture, and be an ambassador for martial arts in conjunction with the North Korean Taekwondo organization. So that was another cool experience that was related to Hapkido, in that the group that we were organizing were combined with the Taekwondo Times Magazine and then a Hapkido group with Dr. Kim.
That's great. Yeah, I remember. I'm not sure how I didn't end up going to that, but once you guys went and I saw the pictures and heard the stories, I was definitely had wish I had went along with you.
Yeah.
So we're I know we gotta wrap up at 2. So your Uber driver, we got about 10 minutes left. So I'm looking through my list of things that I have down to talk, and I want to jump to one of the last things I put was when you promoted to 7th degree black belt in 2014. You got to share that moment with some pretty amazing martial artists. If you could just talk about maybe, the test leading up to that, and some of the influences that were in that group. I guess I could.
We called it the Magnificent
Yes.
Seven. And one of the reasons for that is back in the 60s, Grandmaster Shin had a group of black belts from the Trenton Karate School that were called the Magnificent Seven. Okay. And Master Chambliss was one of that Magnificent Seven. And I told you earlier in today's interview that I remember the memorable occasion of seeing him test for 4th degree black belt. And these guys were pretty ferocious. They were, like you mentioned, that I'm one of Grandmaster G's top guys, but Master Chambliss was one of Grandmaster Shin's top guys his entire life. That's his thing. Now, obviously, I was one of Grandmaster Shin's top guys too. I personally represented him at the Core State Center when I was teaching Hapkido, when I did events at EFC. Everywhere's I wore his patch. He never said, hey, don't wear that patch. And I always asked his permission on any big event when I was going to travel. I let him know, hey, I'm going to do this. Is it okay? He knew I was going to North Korea. When I came back, I brought him the stuff that I collected and gifted some stuff to him. And, he knew about that. Can you repeat your question for me again?
Yeah. So, for those that don't know, the people that promoted with you at the time was Stephen Chambliss, Vance Britt, Jerry Stein, Master Khan, yourself, Master Sharp, and am I missing one? Who else am I missing? Who?
Khan.
I said, yeah. So Khan, Sharp,
Alan Sharp, Jerry Stein, Vance Britt, Stephen Chambliss,
you, and
are we missing?
am I missing one? Master Vaughn, Chuck Vaughn.
Chuck Vaughn. Yeah, Chuck Vaughn. Yeah. So we actually have like a meme of us.
Yes.
Back as the Magnificent Seven,
It's pretty great.
And so on. So the metaphor of the Magnificent Seven came from Master Chambliss from back in the day. There was a group. And then in 2014, that group of 7th degrees that tested. Testing with those gentlemen was a highlight of my life. It's like a high apex, of testing. And one of the things I remember is just being next to Master Chambliss the whole time and going through that test and having that experience because I was right next to him. And I've been doing that my entire adult life. As long as we had Region 8 instructors class, we would line up and Master Chambliss would be the highest belt in the class. And we would do the class, and I never went ahead of him, and I always just worked with him, on what our standards were, how we did the forms, the tempo of the forms. Grandmaster Shin would often be teaching and then look at us and he wasn't sure about something, and we would give our opinion, what we think it was, and sometimes it would agree, sometimes it wouldn't agree, but we would always work it out in Region 8. And we had our own way of practicing as a group and keeping our standards a certain way, and in the European group under Khan, they do that. They work together. They're a group. They're a team. They set a standard. They stick together. And the masters have different culture, Vance Britt traveled the world. He had opportunities to train in different countries, different places, but his way of contributing was very unique. So he had a big impact in our master's training because of directing that program for so many years, and Master Chambliss, he was by and large a significant influence on Region 8 because he didn't travel a lot and do a lot of foreign teaching and those other things, but he was the stalwart, the leader here in Region 8, Jerry Stein, he had a unique training, other experience. And at the Master's Clinic, he shared a number of things. He also helped work on the advanced forms So he did the unshu form, one shoe that we added. He was assigned that. And we created a new master's form for the highest level, Sorim Jangquan, and we made Seige Jangquan, is in book 6, as the highest form in our system, as a replacement for Sorim Jangquan, which was not really perpetuated well in Tang Soo Do. No one really knows for sure what that form looks like. When I went to the Shaolin Temple in 2005, Dr. Kim arranged a private lesson for me to learn Sorim Jangquan at that Shaolin Temple in the school, in the training school. And I had a private lesson on it. But we don't know that that's the form that would have been represented by Huang Qi as Sorim Jangquan. But we replaced that form, so we have Seige Jangquan as our highest form. And that was developed with Master Witten for Grandmaster Shin.
Sure.
I think that answers a little bit of your question.
Yes, sir. It does. You know, like I said, I remember being there for that, and obviously was very proud of you for promoting there, being my instructor. But then to see, like you said, all those the legends that were a part of that was pretty awesome. And I don't think it will ever be. It may be repeated, but it'll be a long time until you see a group like that again. So. We're winding down, sir. We got about 3 minutes left, and you know, it's one of those where we probably could talk for another hour. So maybe at episode 100, we'll have to get together again and continue to chat.
Yes. And I want to give an accolade to you and to Jeffrey for setting your mind to do this, because I know that the audience that watches these interviews. And I find it interesting learning about younger masters and newer masters, and then the older masters, and people have different experiences or levels of expertise. I've enjoyed watching all of the masters interviews. So I've watched them all. I didn't, like I said, get on to all of them live, but they're recorded and they're archived under the masters group. Masters interview group is really a cool resource just to see the human interest aspects of so many different diverse kinds of people.
Yes, sir. I remember we talked and you mentioned that you were following along and you enjoyed them, and that was and that meant a lot to me, and I appreciate that. So thank you again for joining me, and obviously being my instructor for many years, and hopefully for many years going forward, sir.
Well, I'm grateful every day for my health and still teaching and enjoying and still working on, you know, there'll be a tiny tiger in here later today that I'm sculpting.
Yes.
A little boy right now named David. And David is a legacy family member. He's joining in, you know, so you end up with different generations of students. So, you know, I have the Ho family here, and I have Victoria as a little brown belt, but yet her sister is a master's candidate. You know, she's in the leadership program.
Right.
It's a potential candidate, you know, and so everybody in between.
Yes.
So it's just wonderful to see the generations. I have Arden is going for a 2nd degree black belt this cycle.
As my
Arden just got his report card today, straight A's.
That's awesome.
That's a cool kid right there.
Yes, very balanced.
Fun parenting and teaching and enjoying martial arts.
Yes, sir. I had a fun, you'll appreciate this. I did an intro last week, and it was Rich Han's grandson.
Wow.
I talked to his daughter, talked about as a kid, she would go to her Uncle Paul's karate studio, Paul Mamitis, Master Mamitis.
Yeah. Paul, you're aware of the lineage. Most people don't realize, but Richard Hahn was known in our schools, but actually Paul Mamitis was the initial instructor of influence.
So yeah, she was like, yeah, I remember being at my Uncle Paul's studio growing up, and my brother would take class. So yeah, Rich's grandson just started down at Evolution, so it's kind of cool. You talked about that generation. So
probably 3 generations out there now.
Yes, sir. So okay, sir. Well, thank you again for joining me.
Thank you everybody who came on to, you know, listen to the interview, and Tang Soo.
Tang Soo, everyone. Thanks for joining me. We'll see you next week.
See you. Bye.
Bye.